We'd prefer if you left. What would you do if strangers called you disgusting at a Christmas party? Victoria's voice cut through the fancy party like ice. Her expensive dress sparkled under the big lights. She looked me up and down like I was dirty. My hands were still messy from helping a stranger with her broken car. My clothes were wrinkled from the cold weather. I got to my son's in-laws' big house, 30 minutes late. I thought they would understand, but they only showed me hate. If you're watching this, please subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Let me tell you how a 64-year-old man named Robert Thompson felt terrible at the fanciest Christmas party in Greenfield, Connecticut. It's a story about family, pride, and how helping someone on the road can change your whole life. 3 months before this, I lived quietly in my small apartment. I tried hard to make my small pension money last. My wife Sarah died 5 years ago. She left me just enough to get by, but not enough to feel good. Then my son, Jonathan, called me. He had news that should have made me happy. "Dad," he said carefully, "Victoria's family wants to meet you. Really meet you this time." I should have been excited, right? After 3 years of marriage, Victoria barely talked to me. The Carters were super rich people. They had old money and old ways. They definitely did not like people like me. Victoria's grandmother built a big business. Every family party felt like a meeting where I didn't belong. "That's great, son," I said, but something in Jonathan's voice worried me. "What changed their minds?" He paused. "Victoria's been talking to her grandmother about family. She says it's important to include everyone," he added. "Maybe dress nicely. You know how they care about how people look." I knew exactly how they cared about looks. Every time I saw Victoria, she looked perfect like a magazine picture. Meanwhile, I shopped at cheap stores and cut my own hair to save money. But this was my chance to finally be part of Jonathan's new life, to show them I wasn't the embarrassing person they thought I was. So I said yes. I didn't know this decision would lead me to a moment on the road that would show exactly what my son's in-laws thought of men like me. The relationship between me and the Carter family had been hard from the start. Jonathan met Victoria when he worked at Yale Hospital. I could tell right away she came from a different world. When she first visited our apartment, she looked around like she hated it. She saw my old furniture and old kitchen things. "It's very cozy," she said, but her voice made it sound like cozy was bad. I tried to win her over with my cooking and my stories. I tried to show real interest in her life. But Victoria already decided I was Jonathan's poor dad. Nothing I did would change that. The wedding was my first real taste of Carter family ways. It was held at their big house in Greenfield. That party cost more than I made in 5 years. I wore my best suit, it was navy blue, and I bought it for Sarah's funeral. I felt like a little bird among fancy peacocks. Victoria's mom, Madeline Carter, introduced me as Jonathan's dad from New Haven. She didn't say my name, just my relationship and where I lived. Like I was someone they had to say hello to but didn't really want there. But Victoria's grandmother interested me most. Caroline Carter was elegant like only very rich, older women can be. Unlike what Victoria said about her being out of touch, Caroline noticed everything. Her sharp blue eyes took mental notes on all conversations. "Your grandmother seems very smart," I said to Victoria during the party. "Grandmother keeps her opinions to herself mostly." Victoria replied carefully. "She lets Dad handle the business decisions." I found that interesting. Lets instead of can't, or doesn't. But family stuff in rich families was probably different from what I knew. After the wedding, Jonathan and Victoria moved to Connecticut. They lived closer to her family. Our visits became less often. Our phone calls got shorter. When I did see them, talking felt forced. It was like Jonathan was translating between two different languages, mine and theirs. At family dinners, I sat far down the table. People treated me politely but kept me away. Talks were about business deals, country club stuff, and trips to Europe. Topics I could listen to but never really join. Jonathan tried to help a few times. "Dad, maybe you could ask Madeline about her garden club," he'd say. But I could tell he was fighting a losing battle. Victoria quietly pushed me away. So when Jonathan called about the Christmas party invitation, I was really surprised. Maybe Victoria was finally ready to accept me as part of the family. Maybe her grandmother wanted her to include me. Looking back, I should have seen the invitation for what it really was. The week before the Christmas party, I worked hard to get ready. It felt like the most important thing in my life. In many ways, it was. This felt like my final test to be accepted into Jonathan's new world. I spent 2 days shopping for a suit. I tried to find something that looked expensive but fit my budget. The salesman at Nordstrom Rack was patient. I told him, I want to fit in at a very formal Christmas party. The kind where everyone has money and judges you by what you're wearing. He found me a burgundy shirt with small sparkly bits. It was marked down from $200 to $65. It wasn't fancied brand, but it looked okay. I bought matching shoes that hurt my feet and a small bag that matched perfectly. Jonathan called twice that week with advice about the party. Dad, remember Victoria's family is pretty old-fashioned. Safe conversation topics, you know. His voice had that tight sound again. Maybe avoid talking about politics or anything that might cause trouble. Son, I said, I've been having dinner talks since before you were born. I think I can manage not to upset anyone. I know, he said. It's just Victoria's been stressed about this party. Her whole big family will be there, plus her dad's business friends. She wants everything to go smoothly. Everything, including me, apparently. The unspoken message was clear. Don't embarrass us. The night before the party, I practiced talks in my mirror. How to answer when asked about my job history. How to nicely change the subject from my small apartment. How to sound interested in topics I knew nothing about. I called my neighbor Mr. William. I asked if he could feed my dog. Big family party? He asked. The biggest, I said. My son's in-laws are very rich, very proper. This is my chance to finally become part of their family. Mr. William came from Taiwan 40 years ago. He understood, trying to fit into new worlds. He squeezed my hand. Just be yourself, Robert. If they don't see your worth, that's their loss. But being myself hadn't worked for 3 years. Maybe it was time to try being who they wanted me to be. I went to bed early. My alarm set for 8 a.m., so I'd have plenty time to get ready. The party started at 2 p.m. I planned every detail. Hair appointment at 10. Suit fitting at noon. Arrive at 2:15. I fell asleep thinking about how surprised Victoria would be when I walked in looking neat. How her parents might finally see me as good enough for their son. How Caroline might actually talk with me. I should have paid more attention to the weather report. Saturday morning came with a bad December storm. Connecticut winters are famous for this. I woke to ice hitting my windows. My phone had a weather alert warning of dangerous roads. The hair appointment was canceled when the shop lost power. The suit pickup was delayed when the street flooded. By noon, I sat in my robe, watching freezing rain cover everything. I wondered if the party would even happen. Jonathan called at 12:30. Dad, are you still coming? The roads are pretty bad. I heard Victoria in the background. Tell him the party's still on. Everyone's already here. Everyone except me. I realized I was the only one driving through the weather to get there. It hit me harder than it should have. I'll be there, I told Jonathan. I wouldn't miss it. Without help, I did my own hair and shaved. I tried to get the polished look I'd seen on Jonathan. My hands shook a little as I used the razor. Nerves, I told myself, not age. The burgundy shirt fit perfectly. For a moment, I felt really neat. The man in my mirror looked like he belonged at fancy parties. At least until I saw my practical winter coat, the only one I owned. I left my apartment at 1:30. I gave myself extra time for careful driving. The roads were slick, but okay if you drove slowly. Other drivers had the same idea. Traffic moved very slowly. Everything was going fine until I reached the winding road to the Carter house. That's when I saw her, an old woman standing by a fancy car with its hood up. She wore an expensive coat, but no hat. Ice formed on her gray hair. I could have driven past. The smart thing would have been to call AAA and keep going to the party. I was already late. Stopping would make me even later, but I couldn't leave an old woman stuck in dangerous weather. Even if it meant arriving at the most important event of my life, looking messy. Little did she know. The old woman held his future in her hands. I pulled over and rolled down my window. "Do you need help?" The woman turned. I got my first clear look at her face. She was probably late 70s. She had strong features showing she'd been beautiful her whole life. Her blue eyes were sharp and checking me. Not confused or helpless like I expected. "My car won't start," she said calmly. "The engine just died." I should have just called for help and left. But something about her calm dignity reminded me of my own mom. "Let me take a look," I heard myself saying. Getting out of my car meant giving up any hope of arriving clean. The freezing rain soaked through my coat right away. I felt my carefully done hair starting to droop. The woman watched as I looked at her engine. I wasn't a car expert, but Sarah had taught me basic car stuff before she died. "Battery terminals are corroded," I called out over the wind. "Do you have any cola in the car?" She looked at me like I was crazy. Coca-Cola works great for cleaning battery corrosion. Emergency trick my wife taught me. She opened her car and pulled out a small bottle of Coke. It came from what looked like a very expensive bag. As I poured the Coke over the battery terminals, I knew how silly this looked. Two people in nice clothes doing roadside repairs in an ice storm. "You're gonna ruin your shirt," she observed. "Already am," I said, scraping corrosion with my car key. Sometimes you just have to help people more than staying clean. While we waited for the Coke to work, she asked where I was headed. "Christmas party," I said. I didn't mention it was my first real invite into the Carter family. "My son's in-laws, very formal affair. And you stopped to help a stranger?" I shrugged. "Couldn't leave you stuck. Family events happen every year, but leaving someone in danger, that would bother me forever." Something changed in her look when I said that. Her checking eyes softened into something like approval. "Try starting it now," I suggested. The engine turned over smoothly. She smiled, the first real warm smile I'd seen from her. "You're very kind," she said. "Not many people would have stopped, especially dressed for a formal party." I looked down at my outfit. My coat was soaked. My shirt had grease spots. My hair was stuck to my head. The neat man I'd been an hour ago was gone. "Well, I can't exactly show up to this party looking like this," I said, trying to laugh off my disappointment. "Maybe I should just head home." "Nonsense," she said firmly. "Anyone worth knowing will understand that you put kindness before looking good. And if they don't understand that, they're not worth knowing." She reached into her bag and handed me a fancy business card. "Caroline Carter," it read. My heart stopped. "You're Victoria's grandma," I whispered. Her blue eyes, so much like Victoria's but much warmer, held something that might have been satisfaction. "I am indeed, and you must be Robert Thompson, Jonathan's dad." She paused, studying my shocked face. I'd been very curious to meet the man who raised such a good son. My mind raced.
This was Caroline Carter, the woman Victoria described as letting others handle business decisions? The one who supposedly stayed out of family stuff? I had no idea, I stammered. "I'm quite sure you didn't," she said. Her tone had meaning I couldn't quite get.
"Shall we head to the party together? I think you'll find it more interesting than you expected." Following Caroline Carter's car up the winding drive, I tried to understand what happened. I'd stopped to help a stranger, and found out she was the leader of the family I'd been trying to impress for 3 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. After all my preparation, all my worry about making the right impression, I was arriving exactly as I was. Messy, dirty, and completely real. His heart pounded. One wrong word could ruin everything. The Carter house rose before us like something from a movie. Christmas lights outlined every window. I could see fancy people moving through the big rooms. Valet workers waited under a covered area to take our cars. Miss Carter, the young man who opened Caroline's door, seemed surprised. "We weren't expecting you for another hour. Your driver called to say the roads were too dangerous." "I decided to drive myself," she said simply. Then she waited as another valet approached my old car with barely hidden confusion. So that explained it. Her driver canceled because of the weather. But Caroline decided to come anyway. That was why she'd been stuck. I caught my reflection in the lobby mirror and winced. My shave had mostly worn off. My hair hung in wet strings. The grease spots on my shirt were even more obvious under the crystal lights. Caroline Patricia Carter came down the big stairs with practiced grace. Then she stopped short when she saw me. And Robert, how unexpected. The way she said unexpected made it clear she meant bad. Robert helped me with car trouble, Caroline explained calmly. Quite resourcefully, actually. Victoria appeared from the main room. She wore a shirt that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her smile froze when she saw my appearance. "Oh my goodness, Robert, what happened to you?" Before I could answer, Jonathan rushed over. I could see embarrassment and worry on his face. "Dad, are you okay? You look like you've been in an accident." "I'm fine, son. I just stopped to help someone with car trouble." "You could have called AAA, Victoria said. Her voice had a note of exasperation. "Now you'll need to clean up before meeting everyone." The main room fell quiet as we entered. Talk stopped mid-sentence. Connecticut's rich people looked at the messy man who'd somehow gotten past their velvet rope. I felt every stare, every raised eyebrow, every whispered comment. This was exactly what I'd feared, being judged, found not good enough, and dismissed. Victoria leaned close to Jonathan. Her voice was a stage whisper meant to be heard. "David, this is embarrassing. Everyone's staring. Maybe you should go home and change. Come back later." But before Jonathan could respond, Victoria's dad stepped forward. Edward Carter had the commanding presence of inherited wealth. "Robert," he said, his tone politely cold, "how good of you to join us. Though perhaps you'd be more comfortable if you left to get cleaned up. We'd completely understand." The message was clear. I wasn't welcome looking like this. Maybe I wasn't welcome at all. I felt my cheeks burn with shame. I was about to say I was leaving when Caroline's voice cut through the awkward silence like a knife. Gasps filled the room. Could this really be happening? "Actually, Edward, I think everyone should hear about Robert's good deed before he changes clothes," Caroline announced. Her voice had the authority of someone used to being heard. After all, kindness is so rare these days, and that's when I realized Caroline Carter was about to turn this embarrassment into something else entirely, something that would change everything. "Robert didn't just help me with car trouble," Caroline continued. Her sharp blue eyes scanned the faces of Connecticut's finest. "He gave up his own look at this party to make sure I wasn't stuck in dangerous weather. That's the kind of character we should be celebrating." I stood there dripping on their fancy rug. I felt like a bug under a microscope. But Caroline wasn't finished. "How many of you would have stopped?" she continued. "How many would have chosen helping a stranger over making a good impression?" The silence was total. I caught sight of Victoria's face. She looked like she'd eaten something sour. "Mother," Edward began, but Caroline held up one elegant hand. "I'm not finished, Edward." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Robert, would you mind telling everyone exactly what you did to help me?" I felt every eye in the room on me. Part of me wanted to disappear, but a larger part was curious to see where Caroline was going. "I used Coca-Cola to clean the corrosion off her battery terminals," I said simply. "It's an old trick my late wife taught me." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone actually giggled. "Coca-Cola," Caroline repeated thoughtfully. Practical knowledge applied without hesitation to help someone in need. No concern for expensive clothes or perfect hair. Just immediate action to solve a problem. She moved to stand beside me. Despite her 78 years, she controlled the room easily. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that built this family's fortune," she said quietly. "The willingness to get your hands dirty when something needs fixing." Victoria stepped forward, her smile tight. "Grandmother, perhaps we should let Robert get cleaned up before—" "What, Victoria?" Caroline's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "Before he makes us look bad. I think Robert looks exactly like someone who puts helping others before his own comfort." That's quite beautiful, actually. I felt a warmth spreading through my chest. For the first time in 3 years, someone in this family was defending me. "Now then," Caroline continued briskly, "I believe Robert deserves to enjoy this party just as he is. After all, authenticity is so much more valuable than fakeness." Edward cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Of course, Mother. Robert, please make yourself comfortable." But I could see the thoughts happening behind his eyes. Caroline had just publicly supported me. He was smart enough to know that going against her openly would be a mistake. The crowd began to move back into smaller talks, but I noticed the looks now had curiosity instead of dismissal. Caroline Carter had just raised my status with a few carefully chosen words. "Thank you," I whispered to her. She smiled. For a moment, I saw something that looked almost like smart satisfaction. "My dear, we're just getting started." The next hour passed in a strange haze. Word of Caroline's support spread through the party like fire. Suddenly, people who'd been avoiding eye contact were saying hello. They asked about my adventure helping Mrs. Carter. I found myself telling the story many times. Each time made me feel less embarrassed about my appearance. These people hung on every detail. The freezing rain, the corroded battery, the Coca-Cola solution. "How resourceful," exclaimed a woman wearing pearls that probably cost more than my car. I wouldn't have known the first thing about car trouble. Jonathan appeared at my elbow. He still looked worried, but also puzzled. "Dad, are you sure you're okay? You don't need to stay if you're uncomfortable." "Actually, I'm having a lovely time," I said, surprised to realize it was true. "Your grandma-in-law is quite remarkable. She's always been sharp," he said quietly. "I've tried to tell Victoria that Grandma Caroline isn't as uninvolved as she pretends to be. She notices everything." So Jonathan had seen it too. That made me feel a bit better. Victoria joined us, her expression carefully neutral. Grandma can be very protective of people she takes a liking to. Her tone suggested this wasn't necessarily good. "Robert," Caroline's voice carried across the room. "Come, there's someone I'd like you to meet." She led me to an important man in his 60s. "This is Benjamin Morrison, our family lawyer and longtime friend." Benjamin shook my hand warmly. "Caroline's been singing your praises. Says you have excellent instincts for solving problems." "I just helped with a car," I said, confused by all the attention. "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most elegant," Caroline said meaningfully. "Benjamin and I were just discussing some business matters." They exchanged a look that seemed to communicate a lot. I was missing something important, but before I could ask what, dinner was announced. The dining room could have held my whole apartment. Crystal lights cast warm light over a table set with enough dishes and silver to stock a small store. I found myself seated between Caroline and a charming old man who turned out to be a retired ambassador. "Robert helped me today," Caroline announced to our section of the table, as the first course was served. Demonstrated exactly the kind of practical wisdom and selflessness that built the foundations of success. "How wonderful," said the ambassador's wife. "It's so refreshing to meet someone who actually does something helpful, instead of just talking about it." Throughout dinner, Caroline kept drawing me into talks. She asked about community volunteer work and my late wife's sewing business. She seemed genuinely interested in my life. She asked thoughtful questions that made me feel like my experiences mattered. "Sarah sounds like she was a remarkable woman," she said, when I mentioned how she taught neighborhood kids sewing skills for free. "Building things, teaching skills, helping others succeed. That's real legacy." But I also noticed Victoria kept glancing at her dad with growing worry. Edward's jaw got tighter each time Caroline praised me. Something was building toward a fight. I had the uncomfortable feeling I was about to be caught in the middle of it. After dinner, Caroline suggested we move to the library for coffee and brandy. The room was amazing. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather chairs around a big fireplace, oil paintings of serious-looking ancestors watching from gold frames. "This is where the real talks happen," Caroline confided as she settled into a chair that might have been a throne. The smaller group that joined us included Edward, Madeline, Victoria, Jonathan, and a few family friends. I noticed Benjamin Morrison positioned himself where he could see everything. "Mother," Edward began carefully, "it's been a lovely evening, but perhaps we should discuss the quarterly reports tomorrow." "Actually, I've been reviewing those," Caroline interrupted smoothly. "Quite concerning reading, actually." Victoria and Edward exchanged a quick glance that made my internal alarm go off. Something was definitely happening here beyond polite dinner talk. "The company's doing well," Edward continued defensively. "Strong profits, steady growth. The changes I made have been very successful. Financially successful, yes," Caroline replied calmly. "But we seem to have lost sight of our founding values. When was the last time Carter Industries contributed meaningfully to the community that built our success?" "Mother, community relations is expensive overhead." "It's not overhead, Edward. It's responsibility." Caroline stood and walked to a picture near the fireplace. It showed a woman in her 40s wearing a simple but elegant dress from the late 1960s. She had Caroline's strong face and the same smart blue eyes. "This is me in 1969, Caroline said calmly. "The year I started Carter Industries with a $5,000 loan in a rented storefront in Hartford." The room went very quiet. I stared at the picture, then at Caroline. My mind was racing. I was 23 years old, a young mom with big dreams and bigger determination. Everyone told me women couldn't build successful businesses. Instead of listening, I decided to prove them wrong. Victoria looked pale. "Grandmother, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I built this company from nothing. Every contract, every expansion, every success came from my vision, my decisions, my willingness to work 18-hour days and solve problems other people couldn't solve." Edward shifted uncomfortably. "Mother, we all know you were important in the early days." "Not important, Edward. Foundational. I didn't help build Carter Industries. I am Carter Industries." Her voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Victoria's dad, Harold, was a wonderful husband and father, but he was a high school teacher. The business success came entirely from my work." She turned to look directly at me. I saw something in her eyes that made my breath catch. Robert reminded me today of who I used to be, who I still am, underneath decades of letting others take credit for my work. Someone who solves problems and helps people no matter how it looks to others. The implications hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about dinner party talk. This was about power, legacy, and a family that had forgotten its roots. Caroline Carter wasn't just Victoria's grandma. She was the founder, the source of everything, and she was about to remind everyone exactly what that meant. "You built the entire company yourself," I whispered. The pieces finally clicked into place. "Not your husband or father-in-law. You." Caroline smiled, the first completely real expression I'd seen from her all evening. "Smart man. Yes, I built Carter Industries from scratch. Harold was a wonderful man and supportive husband, but the business was entirely mine." The silence in the room was deafening. Victoria looked like she might faint. "But everyone always talks about Grandfather Carter's business legacy," Jonathan said, his voice confused. "The founding vision, the family tradition." "I let people assume Harold had built the company because it was easier in those days," Caroline said, matter-of-factly. "A woman-owned business faced extra scrutiny, discrimination from suppliers, resistance from clients. It was simpler to let Harold be the public face while I did the actual work." Edward's face had gone from pale to red. "Mother, you can't what? Tell the truth about my own company?" Caroline's voice carried decades of authority. "Remind my family that their privilege came from a woman who understood the value of hard work and treating people with dignity." She moved to stand behind my chair. Her hand rested lightly on my shoulder. "Today, Robert demonstrated the exact qualities that built this family's fortune. Practical problem-solving, willingness to sacrifice for others, character over appearance, qualities that seem to have gotten lost along the way." Victoria found her voice. "Grandmother, this is hardly fair. We can't all be automotive repair experts." "It's not about automotive repair, Victoria." Caroline's tone was patient, but firm. "It's about values. When faced with a choice between helping someone in need and protecting your own comfort, what do you choose?" The weight of her words settled over the room like a blanket. I thought about every interaction I'd had with this family over the past 3 years. Every dismissive comment, every quiet snub, every time I'd been made to feel like I wasn't good enough for their world. "Robert has been part of this family for 3 years," Caroline continued. 3 years of being treated like an annoyance, like his values don't matter, like Jonathan made some kind of mistake. "That's not," Victoria started. "Isn't it?" Caroline's eyebrows rose. "When was the last time you invited Robert to anything beyond required holidays? When did you last ask about his life, his interests, his well-being?" Jonathan looked stricken. "I tried to encourage more inclusion, but you let it slide because confronting it was uncomfortable," Caroline said gently. "That's human nature, Jonathan, but it's not acceptable." She walked to the massive desk in the corner and picked up a thick folder. "Benjamin has been helping me prepare for this conversation for several months," she said. "I've been planning to resume a more active role in company operations." Edward shot to his feet. "Mother, the company is running perfectly fine. Financially, yes. Ethically, no." Caroline's smile was sharp. "We've become exactly what I never wanted. A business that prioritizes profit over people." The room erupted in shocked voices, but Caroline held up her hand for silence. "Robert," she said, turning to me with eyes that sparkled with purpose, "I have a proposition for you. I had a feeling this was coming. I'd like to offer you a consulting position with Carter Industries," Caroline said calmly. It was like she dropped a bomb in the middle of her family's Christmas party. Head of Community Engagement and Values Implementation. We'll start with a 6-month trial at $75,000, with the potential for a permanent executive role if things work out. I'm pretty sure my jaw actually dropped. Around the room, I could see similar expressions of shock. Though $75,000 was more reasonable than the huge figure I'd been expecting. Caroline, I managed. I don't understand. It's quite simple, she said. Carter Industries has lost touch with the community values that made us successful. You understand people, Robert? You help without being asked. You solve problems without complaining. You treat everyone with dignity, regardless of their social status. She opened the folder and pulled out several documents. I've been planning this restructuring for months, but I needed to find the right person to help implement it. Today confirmed what I'd hoped, that you have the character and instincts we need. This is insane, Edward burst out. Mother, you can't just create positions based on car repair skills. Caroline's gaze could have frozen water. Edward, under your leadership, our employee satisfaction has plummeted. Our community involvement has disappeared. Our charitable giving has dropped to the legal minimum. Robert represents exactly what we need to reconnect with our values. She turned back to me. The position would involve developing community partnerships, overseeing our corporate responsibility initiatives, helping create a more human-centered workplace culture. You'd work directly with me, at least initially. My head was spinning. 6 hours ago, I'd been worried about fitting in at a family party. Now I was being offered a chance to reshape how a big company operated. But I have no experience in corporate consulting, I protested. You have experience in what matters most, caring about people and solving real problems, Caroline said firmly. The business skills can be learned. The character cannot. Victoria found her voice, though it was strained. Grandmother, this is very sudden. Perhaps Robert needs time to consider. Actually, I interrupted, surprising myself with my boldness. I'd like to accept the trial position at least. The words came out before I'd fully processed them, but they felt right. This wasn't just about the job or feeling good. This was about being valued for who I truly was, and having a chance to make a difference. Wait, Jonathan said, looking concerned. Dad, are you sure about this? It's such a big change. I looked at my son. I saw worry in his eyes, but also something else. Respect, maybe even pride. Son, I've spent 3 years trying to fit into a world that didn't want me. Now I have a chance to help that world become a better place. How could I say no? Edward cleared his throat. And my role in all this? You remain CEO, Caroline said calmly, but with restored board oversight and a renewed focus on the values that built this company. Consider this a course correction, not a takeover. She looked around the room at the shocked faces, then back at me. Robert, you've reminded me that true wealth isn't just measured in financial statements. It's measured in how many lives you improve, how many people you help, and how much good you do with the resources you've been given. As I stood in that amazing library, still wearing my stained shirt and ruined shoes, I realized something deep had just happened. I hadn't just found acceptance in this family. I'd found a purpose I never knew I was looking for. Caroline Carter, who had built an empire from nothing 55 years ago, had seen something in me that I'd almost forgotten existed. Not just the man who'd helped with car trouble, but someone capable of helping others on a much larger scale. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The man who'd arrived as an outsider was leaving as a partner in rebuilding something important. And tomorrow I'd start the most meaningful work of my life. Some Christmas parties change your outfit. This one changed my entire future. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters for us.